The children screamed as the silver craft tore through the sky, blinding white light flashing over the playground. A metallic disc, smooth and silent, dropped lower and lower until it hovered just beyond the tall trees that marked the school boundary. The air itself seemed to freeze. The buzzing sound inside their heads grew louder, like a swarm of bees, only it wasn't in their ears, it was inside their minds. Then they saw them. Small figures, no taller than the older students, stepped out from the shining craft. Their skin was gray, stretched tight over fragile limbs. Their heads were too large for their bodies, and their black eyes were so wide and endless that the children could not look away. Those eyes reflected everything and nothing, as if they were mirrors into another world. The playground fell silent. Even the wind stopped moving. 62 children, scattered across the dusty field, all stood frozen, their breath stuck in their throats. The beings didn't speak with mouths. Their thin lips never moved. Instead, thoughts pressed into the children's heads all at once, heavy and clear. The earth is dying. Your world is breaking. Stop destroying it, or there will be nothing left. The warning struck like a hammer. Some kids began crying. Others fell to their knees, clutching their heads as if the voices were too loud. One boy shouted, "Get out of my mind!" But the beings only stared, unblinking, their message echoing deeper. And then, just as quickly as they came, the figures stepped back toward the glowing craft. The ship pulsed, silver turning to white fire. The ground shook as if the earth itself wanted to pull the children down. But before the blinding light swallowed everything, one of the beings stopped. Slowly, its head turned toward a single girl standing at the edge of the group. She was trembling, clutching her school bag to her chest. The being, G, raised a long, thin finger and pointed straight at her. Her name was Emily. The ship roared like thunder, and the children screamed again. And then, darkness. Hours earlier, that morning had started like any other. The sun beat down on Ariel School, warming the dusty red soil of Ruwa, a farming town just outside Harare, Zimbabwe. Children ran across the playground during break time, their laughter bouncing off the small classrooms built from cinder blocks and tin roofs. Teachers sat inside sipping tea, leaving the children unsupervised for a short while. It was a normal day, too normal for what was about to come. Emily had woken up that morning late, her little brother hiding her shoes again. She was 10, small for her age, with tangled black hair and wide, curious eyes. She loved drawing, loved stories about animals in the forest, but hated when her teachers scolded her for daydreaming in class. That day, she had drawn pictures of trees with bright green leaves in the corner of her notebook. Now she stood by the edge of the playground, tracing circles in the dirt with her shoe. She wasn't as loud as the others. She liked to watch. Boys were kicking a ball made of bundled plastic bags. Girls were jumping rope near the swings. Everything was ordinary until the air shifted. At first, it was just a strange feeling, a prickling on the skin, like static electricity. Emily rubbed her arms and looked up at the sky. Something glinted above the tree line. "Hey," she whispered to a friend beside her. "Do you see that?" Her friend squinted, then gasped. The object shimmered in the sunlight, silver, like polished steel. But it wasn't moving like a plane. It floated, silent, dipping lower, the reflection of the sun bouncing off its smooth surface. Soon more children noticed. One by one, their game stopped. The ball rolled away. The jump rope slowed and fell to the ground. Dozens of small faces tilted upward, eyes wide. "What is that?" a boy shouted. "It's a plane," another argued. No, it's too small. It's coming down." Panic rippled through the crowd. Some kids laughed nervously. Others began to run toward the teachers' offices. But curiosity held most of them in place. They wanted to see what it was. The object dipped lower and lower until it disappeared behind the trees at the far edge of the playground. Dust rose in the distance. The ground gave a faint tremor. Emily's heart thudded. She didn't want to go closer, but her feet moved anyway, following the others who were drawn toward the trees. That was when they saw them. At first, it looked like shadows moving between the branches, but the figures stepped into the sunlight, and the children gasped as one. They were not shadows. They were real. Small bodies, gray skin, heads too big, eyes too black. The world seemed to tilt, as if the air itself bent around them. One of the younger boys screamed. The beings looked at the children, and the children looked back. No one moved. No one breathed. Then the voices began. They were not like whispers. They were not like shouts. They were thoughts forced into their heads, heavy and unavoidable. Emily staggered back, clutching her forehead. The words weren't hers, but they filled her anyway. The earth is in danger. You must stop destroying your world. If you do not, nothing will survive. Emily tried to block them out, but the harder she tried, the louder they became. Images flashed in her mind, forests burning, oceans choked with waste, animals collapsing in empty fields. She wanted to scream, but her voice was trapped inside her chest. Some of the children began to run, but most stayed frozen, unable to move. The beings didn't chase. They only stared. And then, one of them lifted a thin arm and pointed directly at Emily. Her knees buckled. She thought she would faint. Why her? Why not the others? The craft began to glow brighter. The ground rumbled beneath their feet. Dust rose in clouds as the children stumbled backward. And then, a sharp cracking sound split the air, like glass shattering. The light flared blinding white. The children screamed. Emily's heart slammed in her chest. She tried to shut her eyes, but the light pushed through her eyelids, burning. The being was still pointing at her. She felt her body lift, as though invisible strings pulled her upward. And then, everything went black. When Emily opened her eyes again, she was lying on the playground. Children were gathered around her, whispering, staring. She blinked, confused. The silver craft was gone. The beings were gone. The air was quiet again, too quiet. But something was wrong. Her hands were shaking, her skin pale. She could still hear the voices, faint but steady, echoing inside her mind. The earth is dying. You must tell them. You must warn them. Emily sat up, clutching her head. The other children looked at her with wide, fearful eyes. They had seen what she saw. They had felt what she felt. But why had the being pointed only at her? The bell rang, calling them back to class. But no one moved. Not a single child stepped forward. They were too afraid, too stunned. And then, from the far side of the playground, where the craft had landed, came a sound. A deep, heavy thud. The ground shook once more. Something was still there. The ground shuddered with a deep, heavy thud. The children froze, eyes locked on the tree line where the craft had vanished. Dust trembled in the air, and the silence grew unbearable. Emily clutched her school bag so tightly her knuckles turned white. Another thud, softer this time, rippled through the earth like a warning. Then, nothing. The air stilled again. The tree line swayed gently in the breeze, innocent, as though nothing had happened. But everyone knew something had. When the teachers finally stepped outside, they found 62 pale, trembling children, too frightened to speak. "What happened?" one teacher demanded, but the words tangled in the children's throats. Only wide eyes and pointing fingers answered. It wasn't until later, when the fear gave way to shaky whispers, that the story spilled out. A ship, beings with black eyes, voices inside their heads. A warning about Earth. The teachers frowned. Some shook their heads. "Children's imagination," they muttered. But the children were adamant. Each of them described the same thing. The same shining craft, the same silent figures, the same piercing message, and always the same detail. One being had singled out Emily. That night, Emily lay awake in her bed, staring at the ceiling. The voices were still there, faint, echoing, impossible to silence. Warn them, tell them, protect the earth. She wanted to block it out, but the harder she tried, the clearer it became. She pressed her hands to her ears. "Stop," she whispered. "Please stop." But the voices only echoed stronger. In the days that followed, the story spread. Parents demanded answers. Local reporters came to the school, scribbling notes and snapping pictures of the frightened children. Psychologists interviewed them one by one, testing their memories, searching for cracks in the story. But there were none. Each child, separated from the others, told the same tale. The same silver craft, the same gray beings, the same warning about Earth's destruction, the same moment of blinding light. Skeptics insisted it was mass hysteria, children caught up in shared imagination. Yet the psychologists found no signs of delusion, no lies, no manipulation, only fear and something else: certainty. Emily spoke the least during those interviews. She didn't need to say much. She felt it inside her. She knew the beings weren't gone. Sometimes at night she would wake with the sense of eyes watching her from the corner of the room. Once, she swore she saw a faint glow outside her window, flickering between the trees. Her brother said she was dreaming, but Emily knew dreams couldn't make the earth rumble. The other children began to avoid her. Quietly, they whispered that the being's finger had chosen her for a reason. That maybe the message lived inside her now. That maybe she wasn't the same anymore. Emily wished she could deny it, but deep inside, she feared they were right. Weeks passed. The reporters left. The scientists went home. The world forgot. But the children never did, especially not Emily. One evening, as the sun melted into the horizon, Emily stood outside alone. The cicadas screamed in the tall grass. The air was warm, still, heavy. She looked toward the same tree line where the craft had landed. For a moment, it was only trees, quiet and harmless. Then she heard it again. The faintest sound. A low hum, like bees in her skull. The exact sound she'd heard that day. Emily's heart pounded. She wanted to run, but her legs rooted to the ground. The tree line seemed to darken. Shapes shifted in the shadows. And then, clear as daylight, the voices returned, soft but commanding. "We will come back?" The hum grew louder, swallowing the night. Emily's lips parted. She wanted to scream, but no sound came out. Behind the trees, a brief flash of silver flickered, then was gone. Silence fell again. But Emily knew it was not over. It had only begun. Emily closed her eyes, trembling. She wanted to believe it was over, that the glowing craft and the black-eyed beings would never return. But the hum in her head pulsed like a heartbeat, steady and unrelenting. It felt less like a memory and more like a promise. She understood now. They had not chosen the school, they had chosen her. And somewhere in the silence of the night, they were still waiting.